Henry Winkler wasn't always the center of attention. When Happy Days premiered in 1974, it was meant to spotlight Ron Howard as the wholesome Richie Cunningham, America's favorite kid next door. After all, Howard had already won hearts as Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. Nobody expected this newcomer, Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, to do more than spice things up in a few scenes, but that leather jacket and cool swagger were about to flip the entire show on its head. Back then, ABC executives had their doubts about the rebellious image Fonzie brought to a family-friendly sitcom. Worried that a greaser might send the wrong message, they banned Winkler from wearing his jacket unless he stood by his motorcycle. In response, the writers got creative, squeezing that bike into nearly every scene, no matter how ridiculous it looked. Little by little, Fonzie morphed from a tough side character into a figure audiences couldn't help but love. And when they saw his vulnerable side, like the Christmas episode where he was alone until Richie stepped in, viewers were hooked for good. By the time the show hit its second season, Fonzie's magnetic pull was impossible to ignore, and the producers knew they had struck gold. Soon enough, Winkler found himself nabbing the best storylines, outshining the very star the series was built around. This was no longer Richie Cunningham's innocent world. It was Fonzie's domain. Fans tuned in week after week just to see what the Fonz would say or do next. Happy Days merchandise suddenly boasted Fonzie's face front and center, a sign that Henry Winkler's portrayal had transcended his intended supporting role. While Ron Howard remained integral to the show, even he had to acknowledge the new reality. Fonzie wasn't just a character, he was the phenomenon that catapulted Happy Days into television history. For years, rumors have floated around about tension and rivalries, but Winkler kept quiet about his meteoric rise and how it affected his co-star. Only now is he finally speaking out.
I had Ron Howard, who is my brother today, who I love with every fiber of my being. Stacy and I are the godparents of his children. He said, if God forbid anything happens to us, to Cheryl and to me, take them. You can bar mitzvah them if you want. Just take them, you know? They were yin and yang. They made the full circle. We could do scenes, 3-page scenes. We could do them in 20 minutes. We could rehearse them. We could ad-lib them. We could memorize them and shoot it 3 times in 20 minutes. I went where he went where I went. It was uncanny. It was uncanny. I'm not kidding. And that's not hyperbole. I'm not romanticizing. I'm telling you the truth. This was amazing chemistry.
Reflecting on the magic that happened when his rebellious biker met America's most beloved sitcom family. It's a tale of unexpected stardom, network gambles, and the surprising power of pure, unfiltered charm that redefined an entire show and turned a humble, part-time biker character into a legend. Ron Howard was never the type to crave endless praise, but by 1976, he couldn't ignore the sudden shift at Happy Days. What began as a lighthearted take on Richie Cunningham's all-American life had quickly become The Fonzie Show, and everyone knew it. Suddenly, Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli's face was plastered on everything from lunchboxes to board games, and ABC was even toying with the idea of renaming the series Fonzie's Happy Days. For Howard, it wasn't just a name change. It felt like a declaration that his role was no longer central. Up to that point, Howard had rolled with the changes, maintaining a friendly rapport with Henry Winkler on set. But as Fonzie started hogging the best storylines, Howard noticed how network executives placed all their bets on Winkler's rising star. They granted him equal billing in the opening credits, unheard of for a supporting actor, and repeatedly pushed merchandise that spotlighted Fonzie more than anyone else. Though Howard tried to stay gracious, he later admitted it was hard not to feel like a second-class citizen in his own show. Reporters weren't making things any easier. At every press event, Howard found himself fielding questions like, how does it feel to play second fiddle to Fonzie? No one seemed to care that Happy Days had been built around Richie Cunningham's world. The focus was now squarely on the leather-jacketed icon who had stolen America's heart. Even though Howard and Winkler personally got along, the constant comparisons tested their once easygoing dynamic. Still, through all the tension, Howard remained professional. He kept the atmosphere positive for everyone else, fully aware that cast morale could suffer if he showed how truly frustrated he was. Yet underneath the polite smiles and upbeat interviews, the cracks were forming, and it was only a matter of time before he'd decide whether to keep playing Richie's part or move on to a new chapter, one where he could finally step out of Fonzie's towering shadow. Henry Winkler's meteoric rise didn't just challenge Ron Howard's position, it sent shockwaves through the rest of the Happy Days cast. Anson Williams, known for playing the affable Patsy Weber, took particular issue with Winkler when he believed a perfectly timed joke was snatched right out from under him during a live taping. That single moment of frustration festered into a nearly 20-year rift before they finally mended fences in 1999. Tom Bosley, who portrayed the ultimate TV dad Howard Cunningham, quietly resented the show's changing focus. For him, Happy Days was always about the Cunningham family, and he didn't appreciate seeing Fonzie's face take over everything from magazine covers to toy store shelves. Meanwhile, Scott Baio's appearance as Chachi introduced fresh uncertainty. Winkler was no stranger to fame, yet the network's decision to bring in a younger heartthrob made him anxious about being replaced. As if those shifting alliances weren't enough, real-life struggles brought even more strain to the set. Erin Moran's battle with substance abuse led to unpredictable incidents, including a day she arrived intoxicated, halting production and rattling her co-stars. What viewers saw as heartwarming family fun masked a swirl of tension behind the cameras, tensions that would linger long after the laughter and applause faded away. Fonzie's popularity soared to such heights that, by season 5, the writers felt compelled to push the envelope in a now iconic episode. In a bid to prove the Fonz's fearless spirit, they had him attempt a daredevil water skiing stunt, complete with that leather jacket, and literally jump over a shark. Although meant to showcase Fonzie's unstoppable coolness, the scene veered into the absurd. It soon became a pop culture punchline, inspiring the phrase, "jumping the shark," a term used whenever a TV show takes a desperate leap to keep ratings high. Ironically, instead of bringing the show to a crash landing, Happy Days stayed afloat for 6 more seasons. Yet many viewers point to that moment as the spot where the series strayed too far from its simple, nostalgic magic. By 1980, the shifting spotlight on Happy Days had become too much for Ron Howard. Year after year, he'd felt his original role as the show's leading man slip further from his grasp, and it was time for him to chase a new dream: directing. Before the news hit the public, Howard personally called Henry Winkler, explaining that he needed to move on. Despite the tension that bubbled up over Fonzie's rapid ascent, their bond survived off-screen. Howard's final episode, Passages Part 2, aired on May 6, 1980, marking the end of his run as Richie Cunningham, but just the beginning of an extraordinary directing career. From Apollo 13 to A Beautiful Mind and The Da Vinci Code, he went on to shape modern cinema, all the while maintaining a friendship with the very co-star who had once overshadowed him on national television. Once Happy Days wrapped in 1984, nobody expected the unstoppable Fonz to struggle in Hollywood. But that's exactly what happened to Henry Winkler. Casting directors couldn't look past his greaser persona, and he later admitted, "I couldn't get hired for 8 or 9 years because I was just the Fonz." Refusing to be boxed in, he reinvented himself behind the camera, co-creating MacGyver and carving out a new identity as a producer and director. Over time, Winkler stepped back into the spotlight with memorable roles in Arrested Development and Barry, the latter finally earning him his first Emmy Award. It was proof that even the most iconic TV character could evolve, and that Henry Winkler was far more than just a leather jacket and a catchphrase. Long before Henry Winkler dealt with typecasting in Hollywood, he faced a more personal challenge: dyslexia. Diagnosed at 31, he'd spent most of his childhood being labeled lazy by teachers and even his own parents because he struggled to read. Determined to transform his painful experiences into something positive, Winkler went on to co-write the Hank Zipser book series, offering hope and humor to dyslexic children everywhere. It was yet another example of his resilience, showing the world that even the coolest guy on TV had his share of hidden battles and never stopped fighting them. 50 years after Happy Days first graced TV screens, Henry Winkler and Ron Howard gave fans a moment to remember. At the 2024 Emmy Awards, they recreated the familiar setting of Arnold's Drive-In, then took it a step further with an on-stage skit where the Fonz gave the jukebox a signature knock, instantly cueing that famous Happy Days theme. The clip exploded online, sparking new excitement and whispers of a possible reboot. It was as if time had reversed for just a moment, reminding everyone why the show's magic still resonates half a century later. Despite all the on-set drama, rumor storms, and shifting allegiances, the friendship between Henry Winkler and Ron Howard stood the test of time. Winkler became the godfather to Howard's daughter, Bryce Dallas Howard, a gesture that underscores how their personal connection rose above any professional tension. Whenever Winkler faced career setbacks, Howard was there to offer support, illustrating that true camaraderie can outshine even the brightest spotlights. In the end, the story behind Happy Days goes well beyond TV nostalgia or iconic catchphrases. It's a real-life example of how fame can strain relationships, how bitterness can threaten collaboration, and how resilience and loyalty can ultimately heal those wounds. By looking at everything this cast endured, the rivalries, the power shifts, and the triumphs, we see a powerful reminder that genuine friendship often proves stronger than any pop culture phenomenon.